Hello, I'm Robert Hirsch, and I'm going to be talking today with Granville Carroll about his Serenity series, which will be on view at SEPA Gallery this fall. This video interview is a companion piece and an extension of the written interview that will be in the exhibition catalog. And details of all this one can find at sepagallery.org. So, hello, Granville.
No.
Let us begin. Uh, the first question I want to pose to you today is, what does it mean to reclaim darkness from fear and reframe it as a sanctuary?
Yeah, there's multiple points with that. When I made this project, Black Serenity, I was really questioning what darkness can do for us. And so to reclaim it from a space of fear into a space of healing, reconnection, or as a space of sanctuary, is just to kind of give yourself that internal space and perhaps even external space as well to ask the larger questions of life, to ask the questions about ourselves, our aspects or the aspects of identity that we have adopted, um, and just to move away from this more primal sense, right? That's more reactionary, to something that's more mindful. Yeah, something that's just more mindful and where you have a sense of agency over it, whereas you're not giving in to just this instinctual feel, but actually using observation, logic, critical thinking, and analyzing to understand yourself better and the world around you.
How do you think you've been able to challenge photography's kind of traditional relationship that it has with light and visibility, and the fact that so often um, darkness, blackness, has negative connotations?
Yeah, so obviously photography needs light in order to exist, or photographs need light to exist. Um, Black Serenity, when you look at the work, there are these very, very dark, low light self-portraits. Um, some of them are so dark and subtle to where you sort of question what is there, if anything is there. So it's challenging just like the visual practice, right? Or the visual experience that we deal with photographs, but also kind of taps into some of the more traditional aspects of the photographic medium, like existing in the dark room and images being born from light, but then also born from darkness. Yeah, so darkness, blackness, so many people fear it, when you're in a dark space. I remember, for example, a little story is I went out photographing one night. I was trying to get some friends to go with me. It was a new moon evening, so no moonlight. And I wanted to go photograph the stars, and none of my friends wanted to come with me. And they're like, it's cold, I have homework to do, all the excuses. So I was like, you know what? Why do I need someone to go with me? I can just go by myself. So this was still when I was living in Rochester, New York, and I drove out
Oh,
an hour away to Chimney Bluff, and I remember when I got there, it was pitch black, and I was terrified. There's
oh.
trees all around me. There's Lake Ontario, the water right in front of me. It was also around Halloween. So I was thinking of all these things that could be lurking in the darkness that I had no idea if it was there or not. And so it's like this really visceral experience, right? And I think so many people have that sort of experience with darkness, whether it's being outside or, just going to sleep at night. And most people want to have like a little ambient light or a night light of sorts. Um, so, you know, with this work and the ways in which we use light and darkness in photography, I wanted to kind of rethink what that means, right? And existing in or operating within the dark room, let's say. So many photographers talk about how that's a slower process, right? It's a meditative process. So it also mirrors that experience, and where in which you find yourself feeling safe within a space of the unknown, such as the dark room. Um, and also just kind of pushing back against the ways that darkness is seen as a negative sort of identity marker, right? Black man equals aggressive, violent, evil, things of that sort. The stereotypes that then are associated with the more social contexts, um, or ideologies with blackness and people.
The role that you assume as the maker, um, kind of one of the things that appeals to me about this series and why I think it rises above many other works that deal in one way or another with social identity. How does making yourself vulnerable reshape the narratives dealing with um, Black culture, history, and with all our ideas about masculinity?
It's a humanizing approach that I try to take with the work. When we look at the ways in which Black people have been dehumanized throughout American history, or just world history at that as well, right? Colonization of Africa, the transatlantic slave trade, and then slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and even the things that we face today. Um, so much of that is due to the way that the Black community has been dehumanized, and even thinking about the or thinking about photographic history in the way that photographs have been used to dehumanize Black folks as well. Um, and so, putting myself within this space of apparent nothingness, and it's just the body and uh, and the expression of emotion through that, right? Is to say the same things that you experience, regardless of who you are, man, woman, otherwise, Black, white, Asian, etc. That we all have these really grounding experiences, where when we sink into the deep recesses of our mind, we're experiencing a range of emotions. So to place myself there, one, you know, for people to look, observe, and to judge if they so desire. But also just to say that I exist first and foremost as a human before anything else. And that this experience that we have within darkness is quite universal, even though the circumstances around it are, maybe different. The way we approach it may be different, but at the core essence of the experience is so very universal. So it's really kind of to help guide people to start questioning, what is Blackness? And also when I see Blackness attached to a Black person, for instance, what is my reaction to it? If do I approach Black people the same way that I approach a Black unknown space, with fear and anxiety, with angst, or do you approach it with curiosity, right? Uh, yeah, things of that sort. So really kind of just providing that space for people to confront what it is that exists in their minds, as they approach many subjects that are Black in nature.
One of the things that I found really engaging in your statement about serenity was your use of liminal space, space that I would call in between space. I don't know exactly how you might define it, but it's kind of like, in this case, the most obvious example is like, what is that space between darkness and lightness? I mean, what is the space between, I don't know, revelation and fear? The use of this kind of space becomes transformational. So, how
Mhm.
did you arrive at using or thinking about liminal space, and how has it played into how you created this particular series?
Started making it in 2018 um, when I was in grad school. So I'm quite sure that many conversations, critiques and whatnot, liminal space and that sort of art speak came up, and I took it on because it felt in alignment with the work and the ideas. But I can't say exactly what those conversations were or how I arrived there. Um, but it's important uh, because I think when I heard that term liminal space, I had fairly recently moved to New York. I had never been to the state before. I moved there. I had no family close by. I had no friends, that I was familiar with. And so I felt like I was in this in-between space, right? Of the known and the
Mm.
unknown, the past and the present. Um, and so when I started to make Black Serenity and I stripped the world from the work, right? I found myself within the a mental space where it's not physical, but it's in the non-physical. So it just I kept finding myself moving between spaces and never really landing in any one particular area. So yeah, so it's become a really important element in the work to address the way that I myself and others reverse um, spaces of possibility. If you're in between two states, you can really go anywhere, right? You can go left, right, up, down, diagonals, whatever. Like if you kind of visualize it in your head. So yeah, so the liminal space is spaces of possibility for me. Spaces where um, you can really start to direct your own flow of energy, the flow of your life, and yeah, and just the ways that you want to sort of exist in that sense.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from people who view the series, and um, what do you, how does that align with what you maybe had in mind when you made the work, in terms of how do your viewers, what happens when they encounter these dark-filled compositions?
hmm You know, I think what happens when people view and experience the work, the way how do I put this? Their own projections are made apparent. So when I first made the work, like I said, it was in grad school, 2018, and I was questioned on like my photographic process. You're familiar, Bob, with my digital composites and the crazy things that I do with photographs. And I was questioned on that, like, why do you have to do this? Can you try another process? Which, took on as a challenge in grad school, which is actually partly how Black Serenity came into being. But the ideas that really influenced the work were based on isolation and solitude. Because, like I said, having moved to New York and having this whole experience of being away from everything that I knew, and in some ways it felt isolating, right? Like I'm here in this foreign land with foreign people, even though it's still in America, but like to me, it's foreign. I had never been to the East Coast really. Um, but then within that, I also found this sense of solitude where I was like, oh, this is actually kind of peaceful and restful. I can, kind of find myself outside the context of the people and the places that I'm familiar with and that have really formed my identity, or helped to inform it. Um, and so when I first showed the work in grad school in critique, I was super excited and I was like, yeah, I'm like doing something really different. And what ended up happening was that it was not a conversation around sort of these psychological processes of isolation and solitude, but more so about the social identity markers of me being a Black man existing within a Black space. So I felt that was really reductive, and it actually really made me mad and annoyed. Um, and so I spent my 2 years in grad school, like kind of reworking that, and now it's kind of been sort of a thing. It's okay if people come to Blackness or they see a Black image with a Black person in it, and all they can think is, oh, well, it's the Black experience.
Mhm.
What can I do to kind of expand these conversations or the thinking and the um yeah, just the thinking around it. So I've had that experience where people look at it from a racial perspective, where it's about me and my experience as a Black man, which to a degree, yes, because it's me and the work, it's my images, it all is born from my experiences. But then other people have been able to approach it through aspects of spirituality, aspects of emotions or psychology. Um, so it depends on the person, right? And what is going through their mind and what can't think of the word, but I guess how they stereotypically come to understand certain things based on these identity markers or based on the social cues that they're familiar with, right? Some people have the knowledge, the ability to look upon, an image in the Black Serenity series and see the vast potential of emotionality that exists in there, the spiritual nature of it. But then other people, for whatever reasons, they only come to it with a very reductive understanding and viewpoint. So, it always makes me happy when people can see the expansive nature of the work. Um, and then on the other end, it makes me a little bit sad, if people can only see one thing. Because I mean, to me that, I don't want to make any judgments about people who do, um, but from my point of view, as the artist, the maker, it's reductive. So I've really gotten a wide gamut of experiences that people have had with the work, but I'd say the most of it has been really positive and fruitful, and even the conversations around racial aspects have been really informative for me as well. So however people come to it, I accept.
Well, I know when I first saw the work, um, I found it transcendental. And that's what
Hmm.
really uh, appealed to me. I mean, that we see so much work about social identity, but you incorporate social identity, but you take it beyond, just that. And, you take it to what I would call like the cosmic level. It made me wonder how in the history of photography might you see how this work fits in? I mean, going back um, to, let's say, the work of Julia Margaret Cameron, to Fred Hollanday, Minor White, and so on. I mean, works, that were intentionally spiritually based.
Hmm.
And I don't know. if any of um, these photographers or other artists or philosophers may have had input on how you arrived at your final destination in this series.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that any particular photographer had a direct input or influence making the work. But perhaps definitely, after the work was made and further conceptualizing and researching and understand, or understanding um like what did I just make and what does it mean, so I tend to work more intuitively. So I make something first and then I ask the questions either during the making process or after. Minor White has always been a huge influence of mine, or inspiration rather. Just his ability to see photographs as this vessel for metaphor, and abstraction, and allowing other people to sort of come to terms with the work on their own. Um, so certainly, those aspects have played a part in the way that I see photography and how I use it. Discussions that I've had with friends and also while I was in school, looking at Roy de Carava and his work, his use of really dark work as well to kind of shift the focus and the understanding of, folks living in Harlem, Black folks and just sort of the beauty and lusciousness of Blackness that, exists in his photographs. And then you even have, contemporary photographers like Dawood Bey, and his series, A Night Coming Tenderly Black,
Right.
which I learned about after making the work. And just these really low light landscapes, tapping into this like real visceral experience of enslaved people, you know, moving in the nighttime, attempting to find their space of freedom. So it definitely sits within this like historical context. Um, Looking at folks like Minor White or even Jerry Yulesman and how they're thinking about photographs as like windows into the mind. Excuse me. And then also, contemporary folks as well, who are using similar visual strategies, but to talk about other narratives and concepts and ideas. But yeah, no, it's interesting to kind of see how different the varying inspirations and influences that I've had over the year, getting my bachelor's in photography, then a master's, and how it's all come together to kind of, or to help me create, the works that I have.
In terms of actually realizing the work, what were the technical challenges that you faced as a maker? From actually capturing what you wanted and then how to make the prints work
Mhm.
to convey the sense that you were after.
Yeah, the technical challenge, the first and foremost, was the lighting aspect. So truth be told, and maybe perhaps a little vulnerability here, I've never had any formal training with lighting, with photographic lighting, like in a studio setting type of thing. So when I started this project, it was in my empty apartment in Rochester. I had no furniture in my living room. And and I was sitting in the dark, I was like, and then I thought to myself, oh, well, what happens if I just start taking some pictures? So I had a off-camera flash that I used. And then, being at Rochester Institute of Technology, they have great facilities there. So, I was encouraged to use the studios. So I just went in there and started to play with, how to position the light the power levels and things like that to get the effect to where I didn't want it to be like properly exposed. I still want it to be slightly underexposed, but like how do you balance this stark black, dark space in the studio where it was pitch black in there, moving around in the space and then having these pops of flashes that's not going to blind me, and that's also going to be photographically balanced, for the type of work that I wanted to do. So that was one thing, is just playing with lighting and things of that nature. And then the other aspect was the post-processing. Um, because most people don't know this, but these images, the majority of them are technically composites, or they've been digitally manipulated. Um, so, for example, there's one of me laying down, and you can kind of see some water over my chest. So that's me laying in my bathroom in my tub. Um, so, like trying to creatively problem solve, how do I erase these elements of the real world, and allow my body to sit within blackness? So that posed some challenges here and there, depending on what existed within the frame at the time. The printing process. I knew while making the images that I didn't want them to be this like traditional, well lit image, and I wanted the print, the physical object, to represent that in the best way possible. So I started to experiment with different papers, luster paper, matte papers, you name it, and then seeing that how the ink sits within the fibers of matte paper was chef's kiss, and trying to figure out the balance between working with an illuminated screen and how bright the images appeared there, and then the translation of that information into a non-illuminated pigmented print was definitely difficult. Many of images where I'm having to calibrate the different levels, midtones, highlights, shadows, darks, whites, um, to, achieve an image where you can still see something and it's not completely black, but you still also have a range of tonality. Um, that creates that magic of depth and dimension in the work. And then also like sending it to certain printers, they always want to initially recalibrate the image to brighten it up. And I always have to tell them that it's intentionally made to be dark. So don't do that. So yeah, so technical challenges were lighting, figuring out, erasing elements of the real world, when they were present, and then figuring out the proper tonality for the prints. But yeah, it's all come together uh, in beautiful ways.
So one of the things I'm curious about is how did you come up with the title for this project, Serenity?
Mm. So this was also the help of some of my classmates in my graduate cohort. Um, Can't remember some of the older titles, but titles are hard. I think any photographer, artist, people who work with titling, they're difficult. Um, and one thing that I always do when I'm titling either a series or an individual image is I just really try to, as best as one can, objectively look at the work and what is it doing, right? Not what I want it to do, but how is it actually activated in the real world? Um, so, this was many years ago, so I don't remember the conversations quite exactly. But just kind of going through brainstormings, I think there was at one point, I think someone had maybe mentioned like something noir, to kind of tap into that. And I was like, getting there, but not quite. And so yeah, so just looking at the world, the work, and coming to terms with. well, they're black images, with slight gray tonality in there. And and what I wanted to do and what I felt it was actually doing by looking and observing is that it was serene, it was peaceful, it was calming, as well as activating other emotions. But in totality, it's like you walk up to the images and there's a sense of peace and quietness, right, that's in there. Um, and so to connect the word black, which I had realized through critiques and conversations that so many people were, projecting these either negative connotations onto it or these racial identity markers onto it, that were often reductive. So taking the word black and then attaching it to serenity was then a hopeful choice, and to redirect the mind initially before you even see the work
Mhm.
to start thinking of blackness as serene, as peaceful, as calming, as meditative, as spiritual. Um, yeah, so different conversations that were had around the time of making the work is what helped spurred the creation of the title. And um, yeah, so shout out to my grad school classmates for helping me brainstorm.
Yeah, I really think the title nails it because it sets up a certain state of mind and right away eliminates a lot of the negative and reductive aspects that you've mentioned. And I always thought it was an excellent choice for a title for a series. I know it's been a while since you made this work, but it seems like it was important in helping you, discover certain aspects about yourself and the world around you. And just philosophically, how do you think over time this work has affected you um, as an artist and as a human being?
Mm. I think as an artist, it certainly has been sort of the catalyst for, I mean, all the work that I've made since that time. Um, I mean, you can look at my Cosmotype series, and that's really thinking about blackness as of a space of origin. My thesis project, because the sun hath looked upon me, also tapping into the cosmological aspects of blackness, um, aspects of origins, and then redefining blackness, through Afrofuturism. So many of the works that I've made since Black Serenity have really been made on the foundation of Blackness as expansive. And how many ways can I, as an artist, take Blackness and all that exists within it and beyond it, and create something from that? It sort of reinforces, or it reminds me to not fear the unknown, to embrace, these moments that, when we attach the negative connotations of blackness, like it's heavy, right? Like, oh, we're living in dark times, right? We could talk about that, and how we use this colloquial language to talk about blackness and darkness in that sense, and it's much as, yes, the truth of the matter is things may seem dark and heavy and scary at times, but that within that space also exists this space of healing.
So I noticed that a number of the images in this series that SEPA is going to be showing, you're kind of like clutching or holding your body kind of closely. Um,
Mhm.
and is this uh, a sign of freeing, escaping this tightness in terms of the overall project? And I mean, how um, does your body language um, reflect uh, how your feelings, your thoughts about overcoming the negative aspects?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, holding myself is there's multiple aspects to it. One, protection, right? You would want to sort of cover yourself to protect from something that's trying to hurt you. Like what does it mean to hold yourself, to show up for yourself in that way. So many of these images, they span the spectrum of emotion, um, where there's, open body images where it's like you're openly vulnerable to whatever forces are around you. The ones that you, excuse me, are speaking about, Bob, where sort of closing off myself can either be seen as comforting or protection. Um, Others where it's like I don't want to be seen, and you can only see certain aspects of my body. Um, but yeah, but protection and care, I think, are the two main ones when we talk about the images where you're holding or where I'm really kind of folded up in some manner.
Yeah, because it also, one of the things that struck me about it when I first saw this work, I mean, was just how um, intimate um, it it struck me as, and especially in that space, that kind of space where you can project whatever you want to on,
Mhm.
which is the thing that I really like about blackness, is that it can be anything you want. In terms of your show at SEPA, um, I know the space is being altered from a traditional gallery space, and the space is going to be made darker. Um,
Mhm.
Traditionally, a show is presented in. Do you want to talk about that? Why you think, uh, this is part of experiencing the work, and how might the viewers respond to a change in the gallery environment?
Yes, yes. I'm so excited that I can transform the space. Because one, I'll just say, with my work, I love photography, obviously. But I don't always want to show work in like the traditional sense, What I do is not really always traditional. Um, so we're blacking out the space, right? Black walls, blackout curtains. I think we're gonna do spotlight type of situation for the lighting of the work. So there will be some light, of course, because we need it to see. But I'm so excited that I can actually transform the space, so that it's more like a photographic installation instead of just images on a wall to be viewed, right? I want the viewer, the visitors to walk in and then they're just hit, right, with this like intensity of darkness. And then that's going to evoke their own primal sense or experience within it, right? Um, Especially if you were to walk in there unknowingly, you didn't know what to expect, and then you're just surrounded by darkness with hints of light around you. Like what does that do? Um, and also the other thing is, I think it's important one because the images that I've made are made in darkness. So they're not like in a well-lit area and I'm just cutting myself out in Photoshop and then pasting myself in a dark space. I'm actually taking the photographs in darkness with pops of light that come through. And I want the viewer to also experience my experience, right, making the work. And I want to share that with viewers. And then the other aspect too is because it's low light, because it's dark, I hope that the viewer will have to approach the image instead of look at it from afar, but actually walk up, get close, and really study what's there. I don't want it to just be like, oh, okay, I've seen this and moving onward. It's like, no, you actually have to stop, take a moment, pause, breathe, observe, and then make your own conclusion, calculations, whatever, and then you move on to the next. So it's a way to slow people down, get them to be curious, to approach something that they might deem as scary or fearful, and also have just like this intimate interaction with the space as a whole, the work, and then how they view themselves within the context of it all.
To be able to get, as you said, people to slow down and actually look, I think is an accomplishment. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing the installations too. I also know that you're planning to do a workshop at SEPA.
hmm
Um, do you have any plans about what you're going to do? Will this involve explaining and teaching people how to make better use of darkness in their photo-based work?
So yeah, so the workshop will just give people the ability to experiment with that process, and then also teaching some fairly basic photo compositing, manipulation, photo editing, in terms of like how you then take fragments of an image, piece it together so that it looks to be whole, or that it actually does become whole, not looks to be. Um, so yeah, they'll kind of get a little taste of it all. How do you do self-portraits? Why do you do them? Use of lighting, practice, and then time for post-processing. So it should be fun and exciting. And anytime I think about workshops or things of this nature, I like to think of it as collaborative. So it's not just, oh, I'm the teacher or whatever. But let this be an experience where we're all sort of leading and guiding each other, and remaining open to new knowledge and ways of creating. So,
So, in conclusion, how would you just sum up what you've been able to achieve in this process? Because the thing that for me makes this body of work so strong is that it seems like it is both like an artistic inquiry and a philosophical inquiry. And I think um, that kind of thing is difficult to pull off um, in photography. But I think um, that your project, at least for me, um, has done that. I mean, it really, I found it engaging, and it, like you said, it made me want to stop, breathe, uh, you know, and really observe. I mean, really, really look.
yeah, I mean, thank you for that. I appreciate it. For a while there, I kind of wanted to push this project to the side because of the earlier conversations about it. And I wasn't sure how to talk about the work anymore. Um, But over time, I've been able to find a way to synthesize the original concepts that I wanted to talk about, the sort of human experience of just existing within a range of emotions and not always understanding how to navigate those spaces, especially with so much noise around you. And then asking, what happens when you strip the world down and you're left with, this empty space of possibility in which anything and everything can happen, with the other aspects of the social racial identity factors, right? So I feel like I've been able to accomplish a synthesis of the two, where I don't feel like I'm catering to you know what I talk about, like how the world sees me versus how I see myself, finding an equilibrium there. And then also, funny enough, that these images are really dark and they suck up light, right? But in a lot of ways, I kind of see the work as being a mirror, um, acting as a mirror to reflect, the values, the ideas, the emotional perspective of the person looking. Which, you might be able to argue that the majority of art can do that. Um, but I do really feel like with this work, um, there's that level of abstraction to where, however one person approaches it, says more about them than it does about me, um, and their perspective of the world and others in it, along with themselves. But yeah, so it's multi-layered, multi-experiential, and I love that. Um, I love that it creates a range of conversations to be had, and I just continue to learn more about um, others and myself through that process, which I think is a great accomplishment with the work.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to have this conversation. And
Thank
I'm
you.
going to be looking forward to seeing the work installed at SEPA and seeing you again in person in Buffalo. So thank you and travel well.